Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. Let me just get it out of the way. I thought this was a really bad idea. I don't think you should make a live-action trailer for a comic book because it is a comic book, not a film. I also think that that's really going to be pretty irrelevant to the way the book actually sells because I don't think most people are buying these because of the books. I think they're buying it because they're really hyped about Eric July. And to a lesser extent, a side character from his first comic book. But I'm not here to just rag on things. I always try and offer some constructive criticism when I'm talking about things done in the independent sphere. And although he is a very large creator, I still consider Eric July to be part of the indie sphere. So let's talk a little bit about what I feel like wasn't done very well in this trailer. And honestly, I can't speak to a whole lot of it. I'm not a camera or makeup kind of a guy. I don't know a whole lot about that kind of technology, how to set up the shots, any of that stuff. I've seen a lot of people talking about the cinematography or the amateur-feeling nature of the special effects. I'm of two minds about those critiques. They're all valid and true, but I couldn't make any recommendations about how to do them better, so I'm not going to dwell on them too long. Other than to say, this kind of feeds back into my original point about this being a bad idea. The Rippaverse is geared up as a comic book company, not as a movie-making company, and if it splits its attention, I think you're ultimately going to get a worse product in both areas, rather than two really good products, or a good product and a bad product. But this is what we have, so how could it have been done better? Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, the trailer doesn't tell us much of anything. In general, when I look at a trailer, I want to know what the major conflict in a story is, who's on either side of that conflict, and what happens to them if they don't get what they want. On all three of those fronts, the Yaira trailer fails. I know a little bit about Yaira. She works for Projexis, and she's at least important enough to get a press conference, and a key part of her philosophy is adapt or die. That's actually a pretty useful piece of information to have when evaluating a story. It hints at what she wants and what will happen, or at least what she thinks will happen, if she doesn't get it. However, I'm not clear if she's going to be in conflict with Alpha Core, the girl we see her punch out on the street, or some other unnamed third party. We don't know what the conflict is about, and we don't know what victory or defeat looks like for Yaira's enemies. If I was workshopping this as a pitch with fellow writers, I would have a lot of questions. And I wouldn't even suggest they begin rewriting it until I had very clear answers to those questions. Unfortunately, I don't have a direct line to Eric July, and I can't ask any of those questions, so I'm just going to have to make a few general suggestions. If you're putting together a story pitch, tell me who's on both sides of the story. And yes, every story should have two sides to it. At least if you hope to sell it. I mean, if you're just blogging about your day-to-day life, maybe all you need is your own side. But ideally, a story for sale should have more than your side. Second, don't just show your hero at the peak of their abilities. Also show us a little bit of them at their nadir, at their weakest. I personally would take out the bit at the beginning with Isom in it, and replace it with a scene where Yaira is in comparable straits. I think that would help a lot more to draw people into the story that you're hoping to tell. The other point of improvement I would offer relates to acting. And this is a bit of feedback specifically for Morgan Boot, who plays Yaira in the trailer. Accents are primarily about the pitch of your voice and the way you pronounce specific sounds. You may have heard a lot of feedback already about different words that you mangled, but that's not particularly useful. What you need to do is you need to pay attention to the way you are moving your mouth and your lips as you speak. And in particular, the parts of your resonator cavity that are activated as you are speaking words. Honestly, there are much better voice actors out there who can give you better tips about this, but I do have more than 15 years of stage experience learning to speak in accents in ways that I can be understood by people all the way in the back of a theater. When I try and understand an accent, I break it down like this. For example, if you wish to be a very prim and proper British gentleman, speak with a very, very sharp diction. Use your teeth a lot. Bite off your T and your D sounds. Swallow all of your R's, especially the ones that come at an end of a word. Force your voice up into your nasal passages just a bit more than the average American speaker. Or in the case of the voice they ask you to do the Eastern European accent, practice speaking with the back of your mouth. Turn the TH sound into a D sound or a Z sound, depending on the region of the continent you are supposed to be coming from. If you are highly ambitious, the ING sound can be turned into a sharp K sound, and you can roll your R's. But put only a slight emphasis on the vowel sounds, not the very heavy guttural accent, yeah? If you do this, your vocal cords, they will seize up too much, you will not sound so good, yeah? The big thing to avoid is speaking entirely from your vocal cords. If you do something like that, you are going to sound a little bit growly, and your vowels are going to come out all mangled as you try and put that force on your vocal cords. And it's not really great for your voice either. A lot of it is practice, and a lot of it is finding just examples of that kind of accent to listen to and repeat over and over again. And again, there are people who have better tutorials than I can do out there on the internet already, so it's well worth your time hunting some of those down and giving them a lot of listening to before you go into this kind of a part, something where you do have to have this very heavy accent. Now, admittedly, I don't know as there's anyone who really talks in the kind of accents I just used, either in Great Britain or in Eastern Europe. The goal, especially on the stage, is just to speak in a way that your audience can understand you, so they are kind of tailored for American audiences, and less for being authentic ear of those of us who know people with very heavy accents from whatever region. Because as an actor, your job is actually, to communicate the story to the people. So the shorthand of techniques does really already exist, and I recommend taking as much advantage of it as you can, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel from scratch. And honestly, I am a little concerned about the way you were treating your vocal cords in that trailer. It couldn't have been good. But to be perfectly fair, we stage actors don't do a lot of talking while we're doing the kind of moving around that you do in an action shoot like you were doing there, so maybe you were trying to do all the things I suggested and it was just too much to juggle with everything else. I know that would be the case for me. Like I said, stage actor, I've never actually shot a video. Now that I've addressed the project as it is, let me talk about why this trailer made me decide not to buy Yaira #1. If you've watched my previous videos on the Rippaverse, you're probably already aware of the fact that I think the Rippaverse is an honest but somewhat amateurish attempt at creating a comic book superhero world. I think the writing is very poor, particularly on the Isom title. The art is okay. I liked Alpha Core a little bit more than Isom, but neither one created a very strong, memorable effect on me. But I never got a sense for the core conflict of Isom as a character, and he does seem to be the foundational character of the superhero universe. And not a lot of attention is played to the character's core competencies or desires. It makes it very difficult for me to get deeply invested in them or what they try to do. I've been waiting for the Rippaverse to show some indication that it's improving in its understanding of these concepts, and they weren't really in the Yaira trailer at all. All in all, not an encouraging sign. On top of that, I'm afraid the value proposition of the Rippaverse continues to be bad. For $25, I can get Yaira #1 in softcover, where I can get Common America #1 for $25 from Iconic Comics in hardcover. It's got a comparable page count with much better writing, although admittedly in a genre that is a little more niche. We're not comparing Eric to the mainstream here, we're comparing indie to indie. It's very difficult for me to continue to justify this kind of financial outlay for something I'm really not enjoying. Clearly, I'm in the minority on this one. Yaira is the best performing Rippaverse comic so far. It hit $1 million much faster than Isom #1, and it continues to go fairly well right now. I haven't really compared the numbers between the two campaigns because that's not really as interesting to me. My point is, something about this is working for people. Now, recently, I made a video on what I call the passion deficit, where I noted that Eric July doesn't seem to enjoy talking about his inspirations and his creations in the same way as a lot of the other creators that I really enjoy reading. My sense at the time was that Eric July was more enamored of the idea of having a media company that had created these great characters, a la his comic book superheroes, and less enamored of the idea of actually creating those superheroes. I have to admit that the creation of this live-action comic trailer kind of has reinforced that perception. I enjoy indie comics because I enjoy comics. Not necessarily the Marvel and DC stuff, but I have read a great deal of the adventures of Tintin, of Prince Valiant. These days I read a lot of manga. I also have enjoyed comics in the newspaper, Dick Tracy, Calvin and Hobbes. One of my favorite hardbound books is a collection of Willie and Joe, comics inspired by the real-life experiences of a U.S. Army soldier named Bill Maudlin in World War II. They are fascinating bits of storytelling, visually and verbally. That's what really attracts me to comics as a medium. The passion for that is what drives me to seek out new comic books. I really don't want to see my comics adapted to live action. I don't have a problem with it in principle, but it's also not something I go out of my way to find. It's actually rather ironic that the Yaira trailer came out the same day a video I did on why people adapt things also came out. That was recorded a couple of days before the trailer dropped, so it wasn't inspired by that, just a bit of synchronicity in this case. Honestly, I don't know if it's true that Eric July is more interested in owning the Rippaverse media brand, in owning the character Isom, than he is in writing comic book stories. It really doesn't matter if he is or not. If he can get the right people to make these stories, they can still be really good and interesting. I just don't think he's worked out the formula yet, and I'm not entirely convinced he wants to work out the formula as much as he wants to work out this kind of broad multimedia intellectual property that he can then leverage to make money. Obviously, there are a lot of people out there looking for a new comic universe that they can enjoy, having lost the ability to enjoy their previous comic universe or universes of choice. If they're getting out of the Rippaverse what they used to get out of Marvel or DC, more power to them. But the Yaira trailer made it pretty clear to me that I'm not going to get what I enjoy from comics out of the Rippaverse. The messaging there was very clear, so I suppose in that respect, it succeeded. So I will continue to follow Eric July's moves on the business front with some interest, and at least for the time being, I'm going to suspend reviewing any of the actual products. And that's where we stand. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.